Bro, my neck hurts. Holy crap. Damn.
Top activities. Go.
Yo, I couldn't believe when we were talking about showers last night, and then Augustinus was like, "I be hitting all the goy slop on my." I was like, "Yo, that was fried, bro." I went and rewatched some of the stream from last night or like today.
Mhm.
The first like 15 seconds when I said like Dinkleberry dipshit or whatever was hilarious.
Good openings. Good openings. Um. Okay, so if Tyrone doesn't have an issue anymore with inherent justice, and the Wallenbergs are holomorphists, that means that they're basically Thomists.
That's the thing. Are they though? Let's see.
I'm pretty sure that they're SCOTUS. From the way that they argue on merit, at least they're SCOTUS. So they might be like eclectic, I guess, because they weren't associated with any
Any particular
school
school.
necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember what the main issues from last night's conversation were. On the word.
Holy crap! I just got speared through the butt in this game.
You agree with the Wallenbergs when they say that justification is taken in a forensic manner, right?
Well, it's taken in several manners. There's
Uh,
several different senses of the word.
okay, so just let me know if you would agree with this one. On the word justification, it is agreed between Catholics and Protestant that justification in Holy Scripture is taken in a forensic manner, and then it signifies the same thing as to pronounce or declare the just and innocent. And this acceptation is called judicial for the respect to justice as it is approved in the judgment of God.
Yeah, that is one of the senses that it's used. Even like the Salmonticines will say it's used like that in Scripture. Yeah, the Salmonticines quote Stapleton using it like this. Also, if you read Bellarmine's stuff on justification, in the first few chapters when he covers the names of justification, he goes over the forensic sense. The Jesuits in Cologne that censure the like Protestant catechisms, they also go over it. I think most theologians that cover justification go over the fact that it is sometimes used in a forensic sense. I think Cardinal, what is his name? Cardinal
It's not Contarini.
Toledo. No,
Okay.
not Contarini. Cardinal Toledo's commentary on Romans 4, like those first few verses, like Romans 4:5, on like Abraham had faith and it was imputed for justice stuff.
Mhm.
That's like I'd recommend that for stuff to read on like forensic ish language and justification. It's pretty good commentary on that he has.
Okay. Um. Okay.
Blessed Dennis the Carthusian's commentary on that passage is pretty good too, if I recall correctly.
You said that Bellarmine was regarding justification. He was good on the topic, right?
I think he's good at like giving our view. He's not always that. He could do better in critiquing
The other view.
the
Okay.
Protestant views.
But for our, when you say our view, you're referring to Trent itself, right?
Yes, like the positions that Trent allows and condemns, etc. Bellarmine is used by like every, like all of the later theologians quote Bellarmine
Even the
when they're
Thomists.
like talking about justification. He's like generally like the Council Fathers are going to be the most authoritative
Mhm.
readers of Trent, and Bellarmine is the only.
Non-council father.
He's like a non-council father, but he was a doctor of the church specifically around a lot of these theological controversies. So he's like one of the most authoritative authors for interpreting Trent. You can also read St. Alphonsus' commentary on Trent. That's also going to be authoritative since he's a doctor of the church as well.
Okay. Okay. Um. Hmm. But you would also say that like the Thomists later on, like second generation, third generation, and so forth, that they also refer back to Bellarmine when they're speaking on the topic of justification, right?
Mm, they won't do it as expressly, but like they will use those theologians. Like I said, the Salmontians will quote Stapleton, for example.
Okay.
A lot of the Thomists don't write as long works on justification, though, in general.
That's true. From Banya's one was short.
Yeah. John of St. Thomas's work on it is also short.
Okay. Bellarmine is universally. It's not.
If you read like the STS and stuff on justification, they're like drawing very heavily from Bellarmine.
It is agreed between Catholics and Protestants that justification in Holy Scripture is taken for donation or collation of inherent righteousness. We agree on this too, right? This is not just like a Bellarmine statement.
Yeah, we agree that justification is taken for the infusion or donation of inherent justice. Yeah.
Okay, so then if inherent righteousness is agreed upon by both, I think I would agree to this as well, but the contentions Tyrone brought up was that um when they're conceding to like, or when the Wallenbergs are like saying that Catholics and Protestants both agree on this, would, I mean, I'm sure you've read more Thomists than both of us combined. Would you say that the Thomists would also agree on this conclusion that the Protestants or like the Reformed and the Catholics agree on this, or would you say that they don't? It's not like a semantic debate, or it's not like a true agreement, and so on and so forth.
So, as far as the Thomists, are you talking about to me or Tyrone?
No, I'm talking to you.
Okay, so by Thomist, do you mean Dominicans specifically?
Um, yeah, like yeah, sure. I don't mean like Vasquez. I mean like actual
Okay,
strict Thomists.
as far as I know, I haven't read Dominicans that usually discuss this. Like when you read Banya's takes the same kind of like, unfortunately, strawmanny readings of Protestants that earlier um, controversialists do. But
Okay.
if we're talking about the Thomists who aren't like Dominicans, like Guffel or Turnley, they do admit and talk about how the Reformed believe in inherent justice.
Okay. That's interesting. So for the later on Thomists that weren't strictly Dominican, would you, if you were to group them, would you group them into like the Banyasian tradition, or would you group them with the, let's say, Zumelian tradition or like some middle system?
To be honest, I don't think people after the De Auxilia stuff really gave a crap about the Banyasian and Sumerian stuff. I mean, theology kind of dropped off after the De Auxiliis stuff. I think people were just more concerned with following St. Thomas than they were with the De Auxiliis stuff after it was over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that is interesting.
It's like you'll notice, for example, like when we have like the Neo-Thomist revival, if you read the Neo-Thomists on like grace and stuff, grace and justification, it's like they almost, from what I've read of them, they like never talk about the De Auxiliis stuff like ever, unless they're like bringing up Molina to like duty on him. It seems like they never talk about it. It really does seem like people just stopped caring about it after it was over.
Okay. Damn, that is interesting. Okay. So when you're speaking of Thomas post the De Auxiliis controversy, are you speaking of them in as just like someone that's following St. Thomas, or someone of the Dominican tradition or the Dominican order, or
Well,
another
I'm
sense?
saying someone that is like following Saint Thomas in a way that would generally be recognized by Thomas as Thomism, not like the Jesuit reinterpretations of Thomas. That's not what I mean.
Okay. Okay,
But not
perfect.
strictly Dominicans either. But also, like the best Thomists aren't always Dominicans, anyways. Like the Thelmontians were Carmelites; they weren't Dominicans.
Mm-hmm. True. Okay.
I
Okay
think
then.
Vasquez is a Thomas.
A what?
Vasquez, really? Vasquez
Yeah,
is?
I don't think he is a Thomas.
Oh, he isn't. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say. I would say that's pretty weird to say he was.
Yeah. Um, but so let's see. Yeah, I don't know, nigga. I don't think it, because I don't know, nigga. It's just
No, I get you, but I can't A-log the church in general. Okay, Dogma, follow-up question. How would the Thomists view the I don't know how to explain this. So when I'm reading the Wallenbergs and like Bellarmine, I'm seeing a lot of Jesuits being cited as agreement between the Catholics and the Protestants. How would
Yeah.
in your view or in your eyes, how would the Thomists respond to this?
Um. Well, I think Thomists would probably disagree with the Reformed more than the Jesuits would, because like Thomists are generally pretty emphatic on like they're very strong realists, but Jesuits are a bit more not, they're not as realist as Thomists are, and the Reformed and Protestants in general are just not that realist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the Thomists would probably disagree more, but those disagreements wouldn't be on things that are de fide.
Okay. So, mm, mm, mm.
Like the Thomists, for example, place a lot less emphasis on forensic justice than like some of the Jesuits do.
I don't think the forensic. I think the reason the forensic terminology isn't uttered by Thomas is not because perhaps like Thomas don't agree with the declarative and legal realities. I think it's primarily because of the way that denomination works, which Thomists are very insistent that if the naming of like say for example some ungodly, so say like a guy gets baptized because he had a prior act of faith, like an adult catechumen or something like that, or pre-catechumen, catechumen, and then in the church, right, through baptism, then generally the Thomist is trying to say that there was some real modification by accidents of the substance that can say that the subject is just. But so the thing is, okay, I don't know if the Wallenbergs are Scotist, which is fair, by the way. I wouldn't disagree. I could believe that. The thing is this. So, and this is just, you can just consider this my autism. Don't take this as like a broad, sweeping kind of judgment statement. But I was talking about this in Havoc yesterday. So, basically, there's a distinction between man's soul and then the powers of the soul. And the soul is a substantial form, and the powers are accidental forms that inhere in the soul, and they are prior to operation. So powers operate and souls have powers, and the distinction between the soul and its powers is the distinction between substance and accident. So that's a minor real distinction or something like that. So the SCOTUS at the outset, so like Blessed Duns Scotus at the outset holds that it's a formal distinction. So kind of the issue here is he essentially says that a mode is not a res, and it's not a real accident with its own being, and it doesn't have its own inherence, right? And it's not even a category technically. So when I think in the Ordinatio, he says like that any intrinsic denomination of a reality as it is this such being is what he calls a mode. So Scotus insists that there's still an intrinsic denomination, but it's a bit, for a Thomist, it's a new kind of way to think about the topic. But Scotus believes that the modes can modify subjects without being distinct entities. So it doesn't add a new accidental being, right? But he calls it, so that's why he calls it like a formal modification of the subject's essence. So that's why he says the powers are formalities and stuff like that. That's why he says that, even like he says like hexaity is a mode. He says that like the free will or the freedom of the will is a mode. So he like kind of takes this thing. Now the issue is this, that he doesn't believe that mode has a real being. So it's not a substance, it's not an accident, it's not a res, there's no potency, there's no act, nothing. So somehow the intellect, when naming man is just, is making some determination based off of some definition, but there's no real being behind it. So I don't know how that's an intrinsic denomination, but basically, let's just fast forward to the post-Tridentine environment, right? And we take Maestri, who is, obviously extremely brilliant, but Maestri doesn't agree with Scotus here. He actually, basically, he places attention against Scotus, and so he says that modes do have some kind of metaphysical being, but he still fails to call it a real being, and so he calls it modal being or something like that. So he says that a mode is like something, it's not a pure negation, and he does try to agree with the definition of justification at Trent, which is basically, you can call it inherent modification, you can call it whatever you want, but essentially like the intrinsic or inherent modification, that's probably the best way to call it. So he then says that a mode does modify the subject, but he's explicit. He says not as an accident, and he says that the mode is less than a res, but it's more than just a mere negation. So he thinks it's a real determination, but not a real form. And this is kind of a tightrope, because Scotus is saying a mode has no being. Maestri is saying the mode has the most minimal being, right? Minimal possible being. And they both would probably think that they agree. Most of the Scotus would think that they agree, but technically speaking, I don't know how they're agreeing, because Maestri is calling modal being and Scotus is just calling it difference in definition, right? And then no entitative being at all. So the kind of problem here is that if you take Maestri's view, right? If modes have minimal being, then they're accidents, right? That's like what the Thomas is going to respond. And that just means that that's just the Thomistic description of justification. They have no being, then the Thomas will say they can't modify. And then you have reformed extrinsic justification. So now here's my other contention, because this isn't to like throw more shit into the woodworks. Obviously, I'll like shut the fuck up in a second. But so we have minimal being, no real being. Now, what I think that Maestri is actually saying, which, okay, I'm attacking Maestri saying if they have being, they're accidents, therefore you're just describing it in a Thomistic way and you just don't realize it or something like that. But here's my problem. So if the denomination of just is intrinsic, then if there's no modification, if Maestri wants to push back and say there's no accidental being, then the Thomists will have to say if there's no accidental being, there's no modification. But if you're saying the denomination is intrinsic, then that would be what the Thomist fears as Pelagian. Because if just is able to be said intrinsically, not just in relation of the subject to God, but about the subject in his essence, and there's no modification, because again, Maestri is denying accidental being, and that's Pelagianism. And now if then say like Scotus or let's say anybody, let's just say someone who's trafficking in Scotus semantics and Maestri semantics, right? Let's say that guy says, no, well, hold on. Why is that the case? I don't think that there's an intrinsic denomination of such. Then the Thomists would say, well, then the denomination of X is just, Y is just, Havoc is just, Cagbub is just, is only extrinsic, meaning then you have the reformed extrinsic view, which I think is more internally coherent, probably perhaps, than any other. That's like a more nominalist view, basically, right?
Yeah.
So I think the nominalist view is more equipped in explanation for quite a bit. And then the nominalist view will just say things like, well, is there a proportionate means to the end? No. But they're divine occasionalists and voluntarists, and they don't even find that to be erroneous, right? So be it. But I think that if you're not a nominalist and you want to be like any sort of realist, I think it would end up being like some sort of hyper realist. Then I don't know how you avoid the Pelagian thing. But I mean, this is just me kind of talking out loud, so I'll just close there. And I don't know if anything I said made sense, but this is what me and Hadley talked about last night.
That was a very insightful monologue there, I guess. Monologue. That was very interesting, the way you put that out. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I was wrestling with this actually for a little bit. Luke?
Yeah, what's up?
What do you think about everything that
No,
Tyrone
I mean,
said?
I don't disagree with it. I just that I'm just wrestling with the fact that would that truly render the readings of both sides either wrong or like a misreading. That's just all I'm trying to understand. I don't know. I can't seem to say, at least for now, that either the Wallenbergs or Buchanus or Bellarmine was wrong. At least when reading our view and then reading their view and being like, okay, they're saying the same thing as us. But then when we look at it deeper in the way that Tyrone formulates it, it's like, yeah, he's right, but fucking hell.
Yeah, I think the difference comes down to the fact that with the Protestants are not very philosophical or metaphysical in the way that they do their religious thinking. So what happens is they end up making concessions that don't philosophically make sense in their worldviews. I've noticed this a lot.
Okay.
That seems to honestly, Kagbub, I think that clarifies a lot for me, because that's essentially what I've understood, and it obviously, for like an autistic person like myself, it produces it's almost like when the autistic kid gets angry or something because like all the pieces don't fit together and he just breaks the whole puzzle, you know what I mean? It's like that. I'm like, oh no, and I just like smash my whole setup across my table. But you're right, I don't think they are really caring. I think they this could just be yapping, but I think they oscillate too. So I think they're a both and group. Like, I do think that Protestants want to hold to inherent righteousness, and they'll talk about theological virtues inherently, which is quite interesting, even kind of more nominalist Protestants. And then on the converse side, the ones that are trying to kind of take the more Catholicized version at the outset, so by like they're trying to be talking about, and as opposed to professing extrinsicism, they're trying to profess true inherent modification and stuff. They do that, but then they get kind of pressed by their Protestant brothers, basically, sometimes, because it's like too close for comfort. So it's kind of a tough thing. Now, on the point about St. Robert Bellarmine and others, I do think that the church, kind of weird, it's like the church basically, like, it is the case that the church hasn't condemned the theology of like any Scotist, or honestly not even many, like, because every single condemnation of like things has a non-condemned version. Like, so you could even be a nominalist Catholic, right? But as long as you're not adhering to the definitions that are pronounced by Rome as it relates to what's anathematized and condemned. So I think the real question, though, is then, does that make it a semantic dispute? Perhaps, but my problem, or my like, so the autism puzzle not fitting, smashing the puzzle thing comes in here and says, well, why wouldn't the same argument be extendable to basically like any group, like EOs? Not obviously, not like, I'm not talking like some retarded shit like LDS or something, but like Eastern Orthodox we could basically make the same inroads there as well. Which then my fear is, well, if we concede some so like if we take the Puda route, and frankly, I've heard, it's not just Puda, a lot of people have said this, like a lot of people, like I've heard Dende say it, I've heard so many people say that it's a semantic dispute, it's something that needs to be worried about. We can just kind of like deal with it in the theology, like you said, not the metaphysical thinking, but the theological thinking. And then we can just say that we have satisfied the Tridentine definitions. And so I'm like, okay, fair. But then my fear is like, well, is this not going to violate some syllabus by some pope on ecumenism? Because basically, like, I was explaining this to not Kagbub, sorry, I was explaining this to Havoc yesterday, Kagbub, and I was like saying, like, so just one analogy. I'll give two analogies, but first analogy is, let's say there's 4 apples on the table. You speak French, I speak Spanish or English. We can both sufficiently describe the fourness of the apples and both converge on the truth of how many apples there are. But in the case of the church, or just like any Christian claim, essentially my I think that analogy wouldn't be, it would have too many disanalogous elements. So a better analogy would be like, if, so let's say I say, for example, Clark Kent is Superman, and then I say Kal-El is Superman. You say Clark Kent is Superman. I say Kal-El is Superman, right? But then we're disputing whether we're talking about the same thing under different descriptions. If that's the case, then it would mean that multiple languages are sufficient, or multiple kind of schools of thought or worldviews are sufficient for the Christian truths, which to me then slides into that possibly slightly problematic ecumenism thing. Or the other side of this disjunct would be that one of us is wrong, basically, which is what I'm kind of like, my autism has generally pushed me towards, is that one of us is wrong. But I don't like, I'll put it this way. I do think that you can be a Scotus, you can be a nominalist, and you can be Roman Catholic. But can we say like that it's the case that the satisfaction of the definitions is irrespective of worldview? I don't know. That's a hard one for me to like make a educated statement on, because I don't know how else. Because like in that second analogy, let's say we have the same description. So let's just say we take the Wallenberches and many other, like Vasquez and all these quotes where we say that it's a semantic dispute, and we're saying that we're making the same valuation. So instead of saying Clark Kent is Kal-El and Superman is Kal-El, I say Superman is Kal-El and you say Superman is Kal-El. Then are we only agreeing in name as opposed to in substance, right? That's where I'm like concerned, because technically you could say Superman is Kal-El and it'd be an extrinsic predication, not an intrinsic one. And then if you say inherent and I say inherent, right? Well, I mean, seemingly these do different lifting in different sentences. I fear of possible equivocal contexts, basically. Now, obviously, This is a quite autistic, logical kind of analyses, and I think people like Inquisitor, people like Dende, they don't really give a shit about this kind of stuff. So maybe this doesn't work for guys like them. I don't think I understand why it doesn't, honestly, because it is quite autistic. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents. I wanted to say that. That was what me and Havoc were. We were speaking for 6 hours or something. Like he was going back and forth reading me the quotes, and I was trying to be as fair as possible. But so obviously I'm a very worldview committed guy, so maybe I'm not really even fitting for the conversion of Protestants. My only fear is that if a Protestant is because think about this, you know how the EOs will be oh, Rome says our sacraments are valid, so why do I even have to be Catholic? That's my fear. Which obviously that's a straw man. That's a straw man of us, because that's not what our definitions say, that they're valid simpliciter or illicit simpliciter, right? But they oftentimes will force a simpliciter reading on us and say, or the same thing with Muslims. Oh, same God. So same God, different languages, right? What's the issue? And I'm you're right. If I read it simpliciter, I don't really have there's no sufficient reason for them to disregard what their views are, Yeah. So, but anyways, I'll just leave it at that.
So, Dogma, do you think that Wallenberg analyses are purely external, or do you think that it's also internal?
Well, the thing with their worldview is, with the way that the Wallenbergs examine the question, is that they don't get into the worldview debates. The whole thing is about what is the Catholic doctrine, and then what concessions do the Protestants make to the doctrine. It doesn't treat whether or not the fact that they make these concessions is coherent. Usually. There is a few spots where they go into stuff like that where they say how the Protestant confessions are incoherent with their own logic and worldviews, but most of it is not like that. In fact, most examinations that I've read from nearly 100 Catholic authors I've read on this topic now, nearly none of them go over the worldview differences.
And for the record, I think the worldview differences are permitted. It's just like I was saying, then does that make the definitions and what they're picking out, what they're meaning, and what they're signifying, if that affects the res? I think it could, but that's why I don't think that it's probably impossible to say that any one SCOTUS is wrong, or like SCOTist is wrong or something, or like anything like that. I mean, kind of weird. I'm gonna have to read some Jesuits to see what's really said, but Jesuits seem to be, like you were saying, dogma in the same oscillation. So some are hyperrealist, some are more nominalist.
Yeah, Jesuits are really all over the place.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. But I mean, it's hard. It's hard for. It's a pretty. I mean, you can take it two ways. You can try to like possibly take the kind of perspective of not I don't say an ecumenist in a pejorative sense, but an ecumenist, and you can like kind of do like what Puda's doing perhaps, where he's basically like having those like discussions on forensic and legal matters, and then getting like some concessions or in making like some inroad to Protestants, and maybe that's not a problem. The thing is that when I talk to like Christian about this, or like Astro and Hassan about this, they also have the Thomist autism like I do, the Thomist autism disease. They agree with me in private, but in public, they like basically like ecumenize. So it's difficult for me to like even cite like other, culturally, like in this culture, like, or in this space, people, like relevant people. Like even when like Christian talks with an inquisitor, which has only happened probably a handful of times, Christian doesn't bring up these discussions. He keeps the discussion pretty legal and forensic. I mean, I think you've probably seen those discussions, Kagbub. I don't know if Havoc has seen as many of them. I don't think I've seen one. I've just heard about them. And I think the main thing too, bro, is that justification has to be something that's also in first act, which is because the Thomists are very strict on first and second act. Like, so powers are proper to second act, but the denomination being intrinsic is going to require some statement about the elevation of first act, which is where we say God is that's how we say God is justifying us. And that's how we say that justice is like not just on the cross, but also in us, albeit in a proportionate mode to the end. And then I think that's also too how, like, for example, not to go on a fucking schizo rant, I'll just try to be brief, but I think it's also how, for example, like when we talk about redemption and curative versus preservative, these become intelligibly different. Like when we talk about the redemption of Our Lady versus the redemption of like someone else, we can, because we've granted intrinsic modification or inherent modification, we can truly say Our Lady is redeemed the same manner in end, but only differing in means as preservative versus curative. Whereas if I don't have such machinery to like create these signs and present the things signified, then preservative becomes like a nominal label. And that's one of my fears with the scotistic schools. And actually, this is something that maybe I only say. I haven't read a lot of Thomists that have pushed onto this. Although Father Lagrange does talk about like related topics, but like so in order to like secure the Immaculate Conception, the Scotists almost basically say that Our Lady is essentially a creature that is created sinless by nature. But the issue is the extension doesn't stop at Our Lady, because technically all creatures would be created sinless by nature. It would just be occasional, right? It would be an occasions kind of argument as to why God prefers this versus that, and this kind of whole discussion. So I think I think that the church hasn't dogmatized, I would say, like any sort of view on supra, infra, these kinds of views, supralapsarian, infralapsarian. But I think that the definitions at Trent and at many other places, but specifically Trent, so some canons are readable under both views, and like I think that it's not as big of an issue. But I think some canons are more like infralapsarian. Like the canons on concupiscence and sin seem to be a lot more infralapsarian. And even that's why the canon says like concupiscence, which sometimes the fathers called sin, right? They even say like they'll grant even the father's usage of the term sin for concupiscence, but then the definition clarifies, right, is not properly so-called sin or something like that. I forget what the exact verbiage is. So to me, that's like very infra, because the only reason to me that the total depravity doctrine works is supra, because you're essentially saying that, well, so we have God, right? We have creation, and we have prior to creation, or logically prior to creation, the end is declared of man. And so this is like probably what I would say would be like a true equal ultimacy, so to speak, because now the permission of evil is not going to
Joseph,
be
get the fuck off the line.
merely permissive, because the end of justice requires some transgression of justice, which I think the Scotists are basically like, when they do their whole Christocentric stuff, that's essentially like the Thomists who's saying, no, there's real potency that man could have not sinned. Like it's not just something but obviously they don't adhere to the Christocentric stuff, but the Scotists only seemingly hold to it because they're essentially saying that like, well, man's not going to sin, man will sin. I mean, because God has declared some as reprobate. I mean, and some are, in fact. Now they'll still use the words passing over. They'll still use stuff like that, right? So that language is still good and well, but then that being ordered as prior to creation seems to push away at the consequent nature of reprobation, and seems to nominalize permission to just simply be like an equally ultimate end, basically. And so, but that's like, this goes into the volitionalism, the voluntarism, and all that stuff. So, kind of a bigger, it's like a more meta than it is related to the legal stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think Kagba was right though. Like, half these niggas don't even give a shit about worldview discussion, so they don't find it, like, I guess, useful, or they just don't do it, basically. Like even the Wallen Birches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's just kind of my yap. I told one guy, the guy Jamari, he's kind of an idiot. I know like the Colloquia Scholastica guys don't really fuck with that nigga. They think he's kind of retarded, which is probably fair. He is kind of retarded. But I told him, I said that basically, nigga, like I said that you have to like decide like how you view like reality, which would be like that would be the question of infra versus supralapsarian. Because I said if you don't have a clear view on that, you're always going to be kind of grappling between basically like you're going to be like trying to ride the tightrope, basically like Maestri did. You're going to like have metaphysical innovation. You're going to have like basically the tightrope walk where you're basically able to affirm the definitions, but then still somehow be doctrinally unique, which is right now what I think Protestants seem to do. Because even the concessions that you were sending me, Havoc, they're not actually concessions, i.e. meaning, yeah, we're becoming Roman Catholic now. They're just saying that, yeah, like the council didn't anathematize us or something like that, right? Mm. It's not like they're saying that, if I'm not mistaken, unless they're saying that they're becoming Roman Catholic or like that there is. But if they're compatible with the council, then this would then draw into the ecclesiological findings, right? Like, there's a necessity of Protestant ecclesiology that's kind of not going to be valid anymore, basically. Because if they agree that Trent is fine and well, and that they're like, yeah, we agree, they would at least have to just adopt like the quietist SCOTUS view, basically, or something, you know, or like some quietist, like some non-condemned quietist view, perhaps, you know.
Isn't that what they already agree to?
I don't know. I've heard people say that, but I haven't read that a lot about by myself, so I can't confidently comment on that. But I mean, it seems that that's what would have to happen, because you wouldn't want to violate definition. SCOTUS were notorious though for not really giving a shit. Like they really kind of like would let that shit rip. They really wouldn't care about like I think Maestri in one of his talks on the Trinity just basically says that Florence doesn't apply to SCOTUS, basically on the distinction on the Trinitarians topics. So
true.
So, I don't know. I mean, but then if a Protestant, I don't even know where that leaves the Protestants, because I don't think Inquisitor, these niggas are going to ever do it. But maybe like someone like, I guess like Puda or like someone like Dende, they might be like, nah, like I'm good to be kind of like, not I don't want to call it anachronistic, but basically like whatever would be permittable in an anachronism and an anachronistic reading of text, then I guess that's good for them because they're still in the church visibly and they're still partaking in sacraments and stuff. So it's like, it's not like you have to be a Thomist to partake in the sacraments, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. Don't make me
the sacraments unless you assent to the Thomistic theses.
Yeah, that'd be so crazy. I'd probably be like rallying behind that cause. I'm just kidding, but yeah. So that's kind of my view.
Omega sends Mossad agents after you.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, did he revert or is he?
Yeah, he's Catholic still.
Oh, he's still Catholic. Okay.
Yep, still SCOTUS Catholic.
Yeah, so kind of a side story, but I don't know if you guys know what TavNet is. Kind of like semi. Yeah, so Omega is, cause he's a Arab. He was connected with a lot of these niggas. And I don't know if he's still there, but I don't know what his involvement is anymore. But at one point they brought him onto like, so Christian, me, and then there's another guy, I think Strider, and I think like one other guy, I can't remember his name. Their cabinet theology department for all their theology inquiries in their server and in their community. And they brought Omega in because they were trying to basically like do a SCOTUS thing, but then Omega basically like I don't think he wanted to do it. I think he was like not feeling like he could produce teachable stuff, basically, which I don't blame him. I'm not sure how he would do it. But like, remember we were talking about Dende, Cagweb? I think Dende is just basically just going to accept some eclectic teaching, basically. He's not going to like take any one solution, you know? He's just going to like kind of be eclectic. He's just going to eclectic nigga his way out of it, basically, you know? Like just at every cross-examined question, he would just give an eclectic response and then move on, basically.
I see. Yeah. I mean,
so like if you're
if
like,
he's
oh,
still like Catholic at least, then that's good.
you know, it's interesting for him. I think he oscillates. I think he's an oscillating type of nigga because when I talk to him, he's like, oh yeah, Inquisitor nigga is wrong. It's not a good argument. And Inquisitor makes some arguments that I think are actually like not good. Like he makes a lot of these like kind of like historico-critical arguments, and I just don't think those are appealing to my autism. But some people really like those. I think like it's very common in Protestant circles to make those arguments.
Love critical historical theology.
Oh, dude, it's like their bread and butter. And I mean, frankly, some of them are pretty dang good. I mean, I've heard a lot of them, and I'm like, yeah, these are pretty good. Like at least perhaps like motives of credibility or something like that. So I'm not like hating on them entirely. But so he has good responses to Inquisitor on some of those arguments, like some different topics about bishops and stuff like that. But then I don't know about the doctrinal stuff. I think he just basically tries to take like a critical Catholic view. It seems like he's trying to be Catholic, but then open the door to like a one-way ecumenism, which I mean I think is more noble than like an ecumenism simpliciter, because I'll put it this way: if we're going to be ecumenists, I'd rather be ecumenist with Protestants than be ecumenist with Eastern Orthodox, right? I would hope that we don't diminish our posture there just so to include Protestants in the Roman Catholic visible church. So I'm like, if we're doing a contrastive analysis, I'm okay with that relative to the contrary, which would be horrific to me. It would really suck if like we were to me it would like suck balls if we had to become like what do you call it, like ecumenists with EOs. And in fact, that's like the whole fun for me in like yapping online is that I get to like, you know,
EOs.
Basically not be ecumenist with EOs. So, but so that'd kind of suck. I'd probably have to like retire, relegate myself to even more secluded space on the internet, which seems to already have happened. I'm pretty much like not even doing anything on live streams anymore. So yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I'll tell you what though, when I was a Protestant, nigga, none of this shit was on my radar. I'll tell you that. The only reason I became Catholic as a Protestant was because of really just the points on like the unity of the faith and stuff. But I was like in that group of people who like I would hope was truly partaking in the sacraments, but not knowing like the real necessity of them, so to speak. And so now I'm just like more clear on that, but a lot of it was just like unity of the faith stuff. Just
I think that's what gets a lot of people.
I think that was really it for me, because as far as like anything else, I didn't really know anything about like Thomas Aquinas or anything, you know, like that much. I mean, I knew like everyone knows a little bit, but like whatever, the 5 ways and stuff. But you hear EOs running the 5 ways, right? So it's like EOs run the 5 ways, you know, fucking deists run the 5 ways. So like I thought it was just like a stance neutral argument, but then you like start reading Thomas and you're like, oh wow, this is not just stance neutral. I gotta like start.
Yeah, it's definitely
know.
not stance neutral at all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's just interesting. But it's so funny, dude. I asked Astro, I asked Christian, I asked all these guys. These guys are just very savvy. I mean, I love them. They're great guys, but they're very savvy because I'll talk with them and I'll be like, right? Isn't this crazy? And they'll be like, yeah, it's insane, bro. They'll totally affirm me. They'll agree with me. And then even their articulation of it will like signify that they like substantially agree with me on maybe like more on maybe my more polemical critiques. But then they'll like then Agner has Puda on, you know, like he has Gideon Lazar on. He has, you know, like the guy, what's the guy's name? By the way, I love John Salza. He's phenomenal. I don't agree with him on pre-motion, but he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. So he has John Salza on. He disses Lagrange on when John Salza's on. He's like, yeah, I follow Lagrange is wrong. I'm like, yo, what the fuck, like nigga? That's like our whole thing, nigga. Nigga, that's the whole fucking thing. That was like what we came up on. There, you can't turn your back on that. But then he's not though. He's like just trying to like build relationships. So maybe it's just more of a charitable way to exist. So
It's more of a chair. Maybe.
But I feel like I think a few people have been asking me to talk to Inquisitor, and I'm like, I don't know what we would talk about. I don't think Inquisitor really is going to entertain any discussion like this. Like what I just like the earlier monologue I gave on modes and whether they're accidental or not, right?
I think
I don't think he's really going to entertain that stuff.
Maybe with Gooby you might have one.
Yeah, maybe with Gooby. Inquisitor doesn't seem into that kind of stuff to me, though.
Yeah, that makes sense. Gooby is a cool guy. I like Gooby a lot. One of these days I'll message him and ask him his thoughts on some of this stuff, but I wonder if he would hold to. I know Gooby speaks in categories, but sometimes niggas will speak in categories, but they are nominalists still. So I wonder like how he views that. But then there was one time I was talking to him on race, and he was like agreeing that like race is accidental and stuff. So I was like, that means that has to be the moderate realist view. I mean, otherwise race is nominal. So if race is real, it has to be a real accident. Or it's just like a nominal thing, but I'll have to chat him up sometime. But nigga, you know who's doing this? This is unrelated. You know who's doing this effort in like a very bad way? Is so Peter Geach. Peter Geach was trying to like do this ecumenism shit. And he did it like he was trying to like ecumenize basically the Roman Catholic philosophy with like all the philosophy the Roman Catholic Church condemned, all the modern philosophy Roman Catholic Church condemned. But
oof.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. But if you think about it, Protestants, generally speaking, are way more congenial to modern philosophy than not, or than we are at least. So
yeah,
usually they're like cool with like not the class. No, I wouldn't say like the classical ones are, but the classical ones don't necessarily have the same beefs that a lot of Roman Catholics have with like and Descartes and stuff and Kant.
What Cajetan said.
So
namely that just
a lot of them like that stuff.
Okay, let's read from here.
But I mean, obviously, people that come after Kant, maybe there's some issues that they would raise.
Question being on
but the Roman Catholics always are like the Thomists always start way earlier. The Thomists are just like, oh no, like they're all bad basically.
St. Thomas does not directly affirmatively respond to the question.
And that's why like a lot of these niggas will like run into like
The
They
reason
pretty
is
much
that
just do
this
scripture
expression,
arguments. I've seen a
justification of
lot
the
of them
ungodly,
basically when
is
you
the
like start
remission of sin,
talking about
cannot
stuff,
be
they'll be like,
formal.
"Oh yeah, but this is why," and they'll be like,
Otherwise, it would be a
St.
false
Paul the
expression.
Romans, St. Paul the
So, how do you
Colossians, and
put
you'll be like, "Yeah, I mean, I get it, nigga." The text seems to be
Kanyes
congenial to both views, but
Saint
the main question
Thomas's
is the truth of the text bound by the Holy Spirit or not? If it is, then there can't be two
Saint
truths,
Thomas is not
which
direct.
means that if there's two semantics,
Question:
then
if I can't copy
it
this,
seems that you wouldn't need to be Roman Catholic to be so like the whole fullness
Saint
of the
Thomas
truth thing would
does
fall
not
apart in some sense,
respond
because it wouldn't be a contradiction to
directly,
say that the
affirmatively.
Protestant church has the fullness of the truth,
Affirm.
because the semantics could lead you to the truth, and there's nothing that Roman Catholic could do about it.
Whether
And then, but anyways, I don't want to keep circling back on that thing, but
so doesn't directly respond to this,
I'm gonna make one quick phone call. I'm gonna go on Deafin real quick, and I'll be back in like 10 minutes.
and the reason is that expression of the ungodly is the remission of sin. Bro, cannot be formal. Why can it be formal? Now we put like why mark, because otherwise it would be a false expression. This approach the term Lord, which is okay, so term to which is departure from the term from which. Or at least do this. Okay. Yo, Dogma, quick question.
What?
Brocius was a reform, right?
I actually don't know if he was Reformed or Lutheran.
Do you agree or disagree with Crocius when he says that the controversy on justification is a fundamental one?
I think they made it into a fundamental one. It didn't need to be.
It didn't need to. Second. Okay. When you say that they made it into one, could you qualify on that? Or qualify how they made it into one?
Yeah, so basically, I think that their views on justification probably would have been allowed in the church if they had stayed in the church. But since they schismed over the fact that they made their view one that was absolutely necessary to hold dogmatically, they made it into an issue that ended up getting them condemned because their views ended up being a big spark of schism and theological controversy without reconciliation while they were in schism. And so that is what led to their view being condemned.
I see. Okay, so you said their view would have been allowed to hold within the church, but they went further on to making their view one that was necessary to hold and nothing else was basically allowed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they just went, so they're, okay, so they made the thing controversial because they went step. Perfect. So here Crotius says, certainly most serious, indeed a fundamental controversy. Then the Wallenbergs say, yet the same Crotius just a little earlier, when speaking of the same controversy, had written, it was not a cause of separation that the Papists thought differently than the Reformed concerning the formal cause of justification. There were other causes and very grave ones. Okay. Right, that wasn't a cause since we thought differently. When the Wallenbergs are citing that there were other causes, was this referring to the topic of justification or something else?
They're probably referring to the causes of separation.
Yeah, no, cause of separation, but like were these other causes of separation within the topic of justification, or are they referring to like something, I don't know, like ecclesiology or like?
Yeah, they were mostly ecclesiological, sacramental,
Okay.
piety views, things like rosary, praying to saints and angels, church discipline, things like that.
Okay, perfect.
Holy days and fasting was another big one.
Interesting. Okay. Um, Catholic opinion on the formal cause of justification was not a cause of separation, then it's not a fundamental controversy. For how can it be a fundamental controversy if it cannot at least be taken as a reason for separation? Tyrone would disagree. Would you say that hard, like stricter Thomists like Tyrone, for example, or like Astro, or I don't know, anyone, any strict Thomist would make it kind of like how Crotius did and make it into a fundamental controversy, or would they also agree with the Papists, at least of the time, and kind of say like it's not necessarily a fundamental controversy, or at least one that is needed for separation?
Um, I don't think that the Thomists would have said, if like, let's say, for example, if Trent did not condemn the view, I don't think the Thomists would have like fought necessarily for its condemnation. But that view certainly does not work with a Thomist worldview. It'd be more like allowing the view for the sake of the unity of the church than for allowing it because it coheres with Thomism.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Um. Okay, skip that part. Indeed, Crotius says more generally concerning the controversies that pertain to justification, even if they are real controversies and serious ones at that, yet our people would not have drawn because of them. If only they had been permitted freely to teach and profess the truth. Granted this, all those who claim the controversies over justification are fundamental are in error. And Crotius himself is in error, who asserts that the same concerning this particular controversy over the formal cause of justification. Okay. Let it therefore remain certain the controversies over justification do not provide a just cause for separation. which alone is sufficient to remove them whenever the issue at hand concerns causes of separation. All other discussions serve to clarify and facilitate the truth, which must not be confused with the necessity of the truth itself. Controversies over just bonus sufficient.
Yeah, base.
When the Wallenbergs are saying here that the controversies over justification don't provide a just cause for separation, what do they mean when they say right after, which alone is sufficient to remove them?
Yeah, you niggas fuck with Taco Casa.
Yeah. Had that shit one time, but tough, pretty tough.
I don't like goy slop, but I'm about to eat some goy slop.
Only true goyim eat goy slop.
Put the goy slop in the bag, nigga.
So true, nigga. The reason is the expression, the justification of the ungodly is the remission of. Tyrone,
Yes.
you wouldn't have an issue with Banya's rejecting Cajetan's definition of justification, right?
Depends, but Cajetan wasn't like strong on that stuff. Probably is what I would probably say. I don't think Cajetan was like. I think Cajetan's like only really revered in a lot. I mean, he's revered in a lot of for many things. He's a brilliant cardinal, but I don't know if his theology here would be like better than anyone at all, because Cajetan's like probably most like. I mean, probably it's the best contribution ever, I'll argue, but it's like one of the few contributions that are to be a contribution has to be correct technically.
Mm-hmm.
Would be like the analogy of being, concept of being, the formality of being, these kinds of things, these kinds of topics. I don't know if he would be as good as Banez on justification. But what did Banez reject, or what did if you have access to it, or if you have access to what?
I'll read it to you. So, where is? So Cajetan defines it as the justification of the ungodly, properly speaking, is not a movement from contrary to contrary. And then Banez, when speaks of this, hold on, let me forget the second. Okay, here it is. Note secondly what Cajetan said, namely that the justification of the ungodly, properly speaking, is not a movement from contrary to contrary. His reason is that the stain of fault which remains after the act of sinning is not something positive formally, but nonetheless justification is said here to be similar to a movement which is from contrary to contrary, since justification as now considered is made not only from pure negation of the term toward which, but from the privation of the term due to be present. But certainly this understanding of Cajetan does not please us, because in the justification of the ungodly there is a true transmutation from injustice to justice, insofar as injustice does not merely signify privation, but a depraved disposition of the powers of the soul, which consists not only in pure privation, but in a depraved conversion to a changeable good.
Yeah, probably agree with that. That Cajetan would be not correct here. I think maybe like one could like take the view of I'm going to defend Cajetan and go in and like get all of his words on this and see if we can square them away. But I'm fine with accepting the correction.
Yeah.
Cajetan is usually just a logic guy for the most part. And his logic is, I mean, brilliant, but in fact, it was so brilliant that people thought he was like becoming a solipsist, but he wasn't. He was cooking. Father Lagrange says that Banez and Cayetan don't believe that the universal will to save is formally in God. And he says that basically we can't accept that. But I don't know. I mean, I think Father Lagrange is like my I'm a part of his hive mind, but even I think innovate slightly from him. But
Do you know where?
did you tell?
Now, do you know where Father Lagrange cited Banez in this? That would be an interesting read.
Yeah. I have I can. When I'm driving right now, let me pull up the quote. It's in the One God. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, the Deo Uno.
Yeah. And if you have by the way, if you want like a master niggatry, like reference, you can get. I'll give you the EPUB. Do you have like an I mean, you have a Mac, right? You have iBooks and shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the EPUB. It's all of Father Lagrange's works, 16 books in one EPUB. So you can control F it. And since EPUB is like written in HTML or it's like built in HTML,
Mm-hmm.
it pulls way faster than any fucking PDF could ever pull, basically. And it'll pull every single instance instantly, basically. So you can look up like Banez, and he spells it Bannez, and it shows up like everything, which is great. And I love his. I think his commentary is quite like, because of his foremost kind of knowledge in the era on those topics. Like I take his words pretty with like high accuracy. So he does a pretty good job. But did you tell Cagbo about DeSoto and DeSoto completely, basically, like totally like disproving the IC and stuff like that, or trying to?
Well, he didn't try to, but
he's saying there's all these difficulties with it, basically.
I mean, he rejected it, sure, but he wasn't like trying to disprove it. He was just quote mining fathers that were just saying like, other than Christ, everyone was born a sinner. And then he was like, on the question of the mother of our Lord, you can see what my position is, but I will not expound on this because I don't want to like go deep into this controversy. So I'm just gonna back out from this, and I'll just cite on what I'm like citing and what I'm talking about.
Yeah. GG's, nigga.
Okay, so you said the one God, Aristotelian foundation, St. Thomas's method, inductive search for definitions.
Is it an EPUB or PDF?
PDF.
Is it OCR so it can word search?
Yeah, you can word search.
Type in BANNEZ, and then
I see it.
it'll be like, I think it's chapter 19 or chapter 9 or something like that. Article 19, something like that. On the antecedent will.
10th, the chapter. Antecedent. Chapter 9 is on. Chapter 9 is on the existence of God and things.
Oh, maybe it's not that one though.
Eternity of God, eternity, immutability, infinity, unity, goodness, perfection, God's nature and attribute, existence, sacred.
Bro, it's cold as dick outside, dude. Holy shit.
The Goyim is experiencing the cold. Oh,
Low-key, I prefer it, but it just abruptly changed on a nigga. It was like 80 this morning. Now it's like 35.
you're in the south as well, right?
Yeah, bro. Cooked.
What is 30 Fahrenheit into Celsius? Like,
Uh,
Probably low as
no,
fuck.
it's not in the negatives though, right? Shouldn't be. Okay, it's like 0. Or wait, that's 30. 30 is -1.
GG's. That's crazy.
Bro's not used to the negatives. Go.
I mean, it was cold as fuck. Like that's. I generally prefer the cold because I'd rather like not rather let my apartment get cooler, and then when I have autism, it's not as much of an inconvenience to me. I don't feel warm.
You live in an
But
apartment, Tyrone?
I do. It's like a apartment home type of thing.
Condo?
I do. Kinda. I mean, it's like a single. So the whole complex is single story. So it's a 2-bed unit, 2-bed, 2-bath unit.
When are you gonna start having kids, Tyrone?
I'm discerning. Well, me and my significantly less intelligent wife are discerning this present, but we're going to be trying for kids pretty soon. I'd say like early 2026. If we're not pregnant by
Damn.
mid 2026, then we're lagging behind.
Okay.
But there's a lot of spiritual discernment that I need to do first because
Yeah, of course.
I think I don't like. I mean, I don't want to say like I don't want to sound like fucking like like a modern nigger, but I'm not like thrilled at like I think men are very demoralized, I'll just say that way, when it comes to women and then a family. So I need to find some more deep roots in charity to, I think, carry out my paternal duties, my future paternal duties.
Yeah.
And women are just so dumb, dude. It's just like every woman is so dumb that it's almost like unthinkable to me that like I'm like, man, there must be some lesson in this, you know? Like it must be
The lesson is to appreciate what you've been given.
true, yeah, very true. But also like the lesson of punishment and making it disposing it to virtue as opposed to disposing it to despair.
Oh
Or
my
disposing it to hope. Because women are a
Tyrone is the
punishment,
only
dude.
guy on the planet who would say my life is so dumb. I
I
hope
don't
he
mean
doesn't
to.
dispose me to despair.
I mean, I try to be careful with it because it technically can be considered dishonoring my wife, which is pretty, it's a pretty bad sin. I feel like if I said something or like if I predicated more contemptuous words to her, probably it'd be like worse. But women just in general are so dumb, they're just so insufferable. It's very difficult to fathom, like, man, here we are. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not, I mean, I'm here because God clearly wants me here, but there's this suffering that I need to like properly find it needs to be properly disposed to virtue. Otherwise it's going to just lead me to contempt. I'm just going to hate like my wife and my kids. I don't want to be like, I want to be like a, charitable father, not like because already as it is, I'm very like drill sergeant militaristic in my household with just my wife. And I like, even that to a degree is not going to be like as sustainable as people expect because women are stupid. Women don't think about the big picture and think about delaying gratification for a greater end and stuff like that. So how am I going to be okay with all this BS that comes from woman's idle boredom, basically?
You say boredom or whoredom?
Boredom.
I think in my wife's case it's boredom, but I think in average it's actually whoredom.
I see. Well, I mean, I'm assuming you love your wife because you married her at least. So, like,
In a
good
sense,
start.
yes.
Who said in a
In a
sense?
sense, yes. Oh my goodness.
Over, bro.
Well, as long as he's happy and you're happy.
Is she happy?
Well, do you want us to pray for you in your discernment, Tyrone?
Yes, please do. Please do, because all of the I need to properly order all of the punishment that I am obliged to endure. So I will need intercessory prayers.
Okay. I'll pray for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Havoc will pray
But
once he
yeah,
gets baptized, because monkeys can't pray until they're baptized.
true. Your prayers are not efficacious once you're outside of state of grace, except if and when God has it such that you'll be having a perfect act of contrition.
True.
But we are still called to pray, even if they're not efficacious. It's still legally obliged. But
Yeah, Havoc. No reprobation until baptism for you.
Ace, so true, King. Yeah, I
So
don't know. I just think the marriage thing is just because the thing is you can't really be a lay celibate unless you're like a secular lay celibate. I mean, not secular as an atheist, but not like an order, not in like some sort of like ordered towards clerical life or clergy, the life of a clergyman. But I think like it would be cool if you could. You can. I mean, there is a way to do it. You can just be like a average Joe who's just celibate and chaste and just prays for um the as a part of the curative redemption, the virtue of chastity. Possible. It's not by any means impossible, but it's generally, if it's not disposed to a life of clergy, then it's essentially could be BS basically. So it's like you kind of have to get married at some point basically, and you have to have kids at some point. I mean, you can't just like you know be a real nigga, I guess, 24/7. But
Would you have stayed like celibate if you thought that was like feasible?
yeah, I mean, I think well, I do. Huh, that's a good question. If I were to answer without or without frustrating God's divine wisdom, I think that that really was an option. It truly was an option for me. I mean, even now we're like very celibate, but I'm like a volcel now, basically. And the thing with being a volcel though is like people think you're using contraception, basically. People assume that if you don't have kids and you're like, married for, multiple years that you're using contraception. And I'm like, nigga, what about being a base full cell? And, what's wrong with that? But people just don't believe you when you say that. They're like, nah, come on, nigga. You're definitely, having relations of an illicit nature. And I'm like, no, nigga. Hell no. The sins that I've committed since being married are like the sins of contempt, which I literally every day pray that the Lord guards me from contempt, because I can become a hateful bastard pretty quickly.
Mm.
Even to the point of hating my wife. But I don't actually hate her. I do love her. I think she is great, but I don't like to like praise her too much, because then it's like you're like a wife guy, You're like, oh, I love my wife. I love spending time with my wife, and it's like, bruh, what are we doing, nigga?
Is that not base enough for you?
It's not base enough for me, bro.
yo, what's up, Henry? Appreciate
And we
you
can pray for, I guess,
dropping
you
by.
feeling contempt as well.
Yeah,
It's
Like,
please do, man.
probably, yeah. It's a good thing to not want to feel.
Yeah, it's very bad for me. It will likely send me to hell. It's totally contradicts charity. It impedes charity, and it is often the reason that I'm not really able to partake in communion by sacrament, like especially as of recently.
This is a nice quote.
Mm. Well, everyone has vices, unfortunately. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just be perfect?
Yeah, seriously, dude. Actually, today in mass, my the father giving, appreciate it, thank you. The father giving the sermon was like, thank you, appreciate it. the father giving the sermon was like talking about like basically like there's nowhere in tradition or in scripture where we have like any statements from Saint Joseph. And he made a joke and he's like, yeah, I mean, if you lived with two perfect people, then you wouldn't really have much to say. And everyone laughed. It was pretty funny.
Kind of true, though.
And so I was like, yeah, it really is. Saint Joseph is really who we have to consecrate ourselves to, because he really is the example for everyone, like all men, basically, especially.
Yeah.
Most chaste, protector.
Yo, what's up, Leonardo? Appreciate you
Probably,
dropping by as well.
you know, as base as they get,
Hope
basically.
both of you are having a
Peak of
blessed
charity.
Sunday, or whoever else is
But,
in here.
dude, to this day, dude, I don't know, like, maybe you guys necessarily agree with me, but to this day, bro, niggas think that Saint Joseph, like, had another marriage. Like,
Bro.
obviously,
Before Mary?
yeah,
After.
before Our Lady, yeah. Like, some people will say, like, so, I think Joe Heschmeyer and a few of these guys, like, the mainstream normie apologetics have said that, like, yeah, Tim Stable, these are, like, low tiers, you kind of expect it, but, like, I've even heard, like, people who I was, like, surprised to hear they held this view. I was like, bro, what? I was like, nigga.
Well, I don't think that they hold that view to say anything detracting of St. Joseph's purity. I think they hold that view for the apologetic use of like how Joseph had other kids, etc.
Right. Perhaps like a kind of a historical critical kind of point, as opposed to
like usually theology is better when it's ordered towards piety, not history, I think. But
fair. Yeah, very fair. I agree with that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably, you're probably right. It's like a historical critical point.
Yeah, the historical critical stuff is just like a step down the ladder of the Protestant bullshit modernism.
That's the thing, bro. It's just kind of one of those spaces that's, you know, and I tried to do that at first, but then I myself was like having issues with belief based on that, because I think if you don't have the theological sciences, then that stuff isn't going to be sufficient for true faith, in my opinion. That's my, I would say that the Thomists would agree with that, and I would just say my personal opinion. I don't want to project it beyond that, but I think that stuff actually like started rocking my faith early on, because like even though like pretty much every historian agrees, like even like new, old, you name it, like in the
if DeSoto was to say
real personal existence of our Lord,
or if DeSoto differs from the Wallenberg, I'm going to side with DeSoto
and stuff like that. The other stuff, there's other stuff in the historical critical world that do pose problems, and people will like exist in some of these traditions. Like, so for example, forget Bart Ehrman, there's other people that there's several guys in the seminary, in the Bible college world, the Bible college academia world, that because the Bible college academia world is weird, bro. Like they've like basically, I don't, it's so odd. It seems that like the economy, it seems like okay, so I'm trying to, let me not sound retarded, but
I would basically rest
seems like basically, since we're like a very economically driven,
saying that this isn't a semantic dispute,
popular consensus driven culture, it seems that the Bible colleges are not staffing critical scholars of Christian history for the purpose of interlocuting. It seems they're staffing it because it's helping the new generation of pastors and all these, like, you know, like the Protestant like pastors that they'll get their master's and doctorate of divinity and stuff like that. It's helping them preach from the pulpit, like kind of basically modern theology. Like, for example, sessional
You're
theology,
using the
right,
first point,
and stuff like that.
which is the
That's what it
persistence
seems like. That
instinct
stuff's it's.
included.
I thought because before in the past, like with like a Bart Ehrman, for example, his whole job was interlocuting. Basically, that's the only reason he's paid, right? It's because some like
Forms, they
pro-Christian
contrast the
guy will
virtual
argue
and actual
against him and
sin.
then like refine their
Okay.
historico-critical
In
method
fact, there's no liability.
and stuff like that. But now it seems that they're introducing more of these guys, not for that purpose, but because they are
People think
seeing
everyone's according
demands
to them.
change in the modern church. So they're seeing like, especially if
Scholarships.
you're like an evangelical or one of these like groups where like because like my like
Oxford
churches that I've
apology,
been to, we would change denomination. They were very like non-confessional low church. So we would change denomination with our pastor basically. So if our pastor left, we would go from like, basically like one denomination to another. I mean, most of them would be Southern Baptist or Baptist, or General Baptist, but we'd still basically move on and on and on. But anyways, I feel like some of them, bro, they're included because of that specific reason, because they're seeing different demands from these people, and they're saying, well, the world doesn't really want like tulip thumping pastors anymore, right? They want process theology. They want like softening of the hard lines, that stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I think a lot of these guys, like I've seen some guys that are like, oh yeah, like we don't really care about what the Pauline corpus says, or interpreting the Pauline corpus with the Gospels, right? Because they think the Pauline corpus is essentially where the those like conservative trends that are harmful
so far it
start,
seems
basically.
that DeSoto is basically
So like a
saying
lot
that
of the
Trent
gay
or
preachers that have their
Catholics
doctorate in
and
divinity
the
are
Reformed
taught by other gay niggas that the Pauline corpus is basically not prescriptive,
the
right?
arguments on justification,
Which is crazy, by
or
the
at
way,
least the
because that's
formal
like,
cause of justification,
how could you reject
is
Paul?
not
You know what I
merely
mean?
semantic, and it actually
Yeah,
runs deeper.
it's completely reprobated.
Oh, it's insane, nigga. It's like so insane. It's like, bro, how could you reject Paul? And like, there's massive non-denom televangelist groups that basically implicitly agree with this, because obviously if I preach Paul from the pulpit, you're not going to get a lot of retention of the congregation.
Okay.
The congregation is not going to want to hear about total depravity of man and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
double predestination and all. They don't want these immediate theological inferences. They're going to want like something more focused on like the human-made conception of hope, as opposed to some sort of like rigorous Pauline point. But to me, that's like
It's not fully
that misses
semantic,
the
but it's
whole point
also
of the
overblown
miracle,
how
right?
big
Like,
the differences
or not
are.
the miracle, but like
True, but it's
the
just
glory
that
of divine
the
authorship,
Wallenbergs,
because the Pauline corpus is like one and the same divine author as God, as the Gospels, right? So the fact that St. Paul didn't have the Gospels, or like have access to the Gospels, that like there's like a historical dispute here, like as to what actually he had. I think tradition tells us he had a deposit of faith, so it doesn't really matter, right? But like, if you wanted to make the historical critical argument is more in the favor of credibility of the Bible itself, because the Pauline corpus is so fitting to the Gospels, But they're like trying to separate it, and they're trying to use historical facts and these kinds of things, like
the
or
Wallenbergs
whatever.
make it as
I don't even know if there's such a thing as historical fact, to be honest with you.
I'll agree to this, which is true.
That shit's all method based.
Formal cause is inherent
like,
justice.
you know what I mean? Like, they're trying to separate it basically, and that's just really weird to me.
And then inherent justice, Catholics deny them, and is hold on my ears. Okay, my bad. Anyways, so the Wallenbergs make it seem that we both agree explicitly on the formal cause, right? But then when we read De Soto, he's not so explicit, let alone doesn't even agree. He's going more so to, he's saying that it's not an agreement and that there's an actual argument. And of course, I'm going to side with De Soto because he's a Salamancan. So there's like a little bit of bias, but it's also because that the Salamancans or Salamantices and the Thomists in general just love to go in depth on these matters, whereas the eclectics, such as the Wallenbergs, they just, again, it's a super overview review, right? Like here, as I wrote down here, the Wallenbergs are doing an external review of the debate, not an internal one. Because when it comes to the internal debate, the internal critiques of the debate or whatever, it truly cannot be one and the same. Now, it could have been, notice when I say have, it could have been one and the same if, here I write, that the Protestants did indeed have a strong worldview because of philosophy and like metaphysics, right? But they don't have this, so it's super, super hard to conclude on the point of the Wallenbergs. But I will go so far to admit, or at least to concede, maybe, that on an external review, both sides do agree. As where am I? I can't even see where I am. As we'll see. Okay. Like right here. It's like not a just cause for separation. Wallenbergs here will cite Crotius, which is a Lutheran, I think. Lutheran or Reformed, one or the other. It doesn't necessarily matter. But they'll side with Crotius in saying that it was not a cause of separation, that the papists thought differently than the Reformed concerning the formal cause of justification. There were other causes, and those ones were very grave ones. That's fine. If the Catholic opinion on the formal cause of justification was not a cause of separation, then it's not a fundamental controversy. This, I don't know how to take this. Like Dogma said, or Dogma recited when I asked him this question, was it a fundamental one or did it need to be a fundamental one? Dogma said no, they made it into one, they pertaining to the Reformed. I asked him why. He said their view would have been allowed within the church, but they went further, meaning that they added an extra step into making their view something that was extremely necessary to hold and that nothing else was allowed. So that's a yeah, that's
Yo, Havuk.
yo
Let's go to
Wiggers.
prefecture. Yeah.
Okay,
What
anyways,
message has he?
what was I saying? So, anyways, at least after the conversation with Dogma, if you guys wanted to,
Oh no, I have some at the house. Appreciate.
if you guys were to like, or if you guys want to hear that conversation again, it just go back like maybe like 30 minutes to an hour. You'll hear the whole conversation I had. I was asking him a few questions, and Dogma's position seems to have differed from going to it's merely a semantic dispute to it's a semantic dispute externally to now internally it's a real controversial dispute. And you could only arrive at the internal critique using Thomistic rhetoric and call it epistemology, because other than that, there's no way of getting to the conclusion. Bro, ping me immediately when I deafened. Yo, I'm fried.
Oh, really? I thought you were deafened when you joined because I didn't look at my phone.
No,
I was
no.
like, bruh. Dude, so this Father Crean article basically so ass that I don't even know what to respond to.
um, we could. Oh no, it's on predestination, right? So I don't even have Vanya's on that.
I mean, I feel like we could like just A-log him. I think I feel like the only thing okay, so like his whole article basically just is him treating certain doctrinal issues as decided from eisegesis of St. Thomas.
Hmm.
And like if you just read Lagrange where he's saying that Lagrange is wrong, Lagrange is citing St. Thomas like much more actually than he is. So I don't know, bro. I feel like if I wrote something and then posted it and then like pushed it, I feel like it would just be like basically saying that like Father Crean is like wrong and he's like not expounding upon this.
I mean,
And then the
that's true
question is,
though.
would Father Crean even respond to that? Because like, is he gonna explain what's? Because I would want him to explain why antecedent non-motion can't like. Because then Father Crean is trying to say that there's no infallibility of permissive will, basically.
Hmm.
So like, um, is that like not meaning? Is that not saying that God in His permission is not like knowing of the end, right? Because even Father Sola doesn't say that. Father Sola takes the route uh, of like saying that there's some capacity in nature to initiate the movement towards God. Like that's like what Father Sola does. But uh yeah, I don't know, nigga.
He
Father
cited.
Sola wouldn't
He
agree with
cited.
him. But yeah, go ahead.
He cited three authors that he was taking very clearly from. I remember one of them being Maritain. The other one was. I don't know who the other two were, but I remember in his conversation with Astro, he said he was taking from Maritain and two others. I think one of them was
Right,
Merisola,
right.
but I have
I
read
think
some of his things in Maritain, which is fine, but I have not. Yeah, I have not read that in Merisola, so I don't know where he
I
got.
don't know. I don't know if Maritain even is like like Maritain is an existential philosopher. So how would Maritain even be like a pre-motion expert? You know what I mean? Like, what's the like whether or not Maritain? We don't even know. We could like assess Maritain and figure out right what he says. I find what I read of Maritain is that he's quite brilliant, right? So like he gives a lot of great responses to basically like your continental niggas, you know,
Hmm.
your Hegels, your Derridas, your Heideggers, all these niggas. What does Maritain have to do with pre-motion? You know what I mean? Like Maritain, I don't even know if there's any one part of Maritain that talks about pre-motion as pre-motion. Like so, I know he talks about like posse agere and perfect agere, but one could just say that uh, potency act and perfect act are just distinct only in concept, right? But in reality, you don't have like a composition of acts, right? You just have either the lack of perfect act or perfect act, right? That's like what like I used to do with Father Sola, but then I read more about Father Sola, and then Father Sola didn't actually believe that these were only distinctions of reason. He believed that there was some real distinction between uh, imperfect act and perfect act. and potency. But to me, it would just be there's only potency, and then potency either terminates in ageria or perfect ageria, not so God basically like so all have real true potency, but there doesn't need to be any like admission of but we can truly preserve total inability. Whereas like Father Sola at one point, Udato Fomento says that Father Sola basically does admit or seemingly admits there's no like explicit admission, but there's basically it's like a hidden premise that seemingly it would be the case that Father Sola would be saying that there's true natural ability. So it's more so he's like basically like moving away from physical premotion and more of the concurrence view. But the Father Grenier says that essentially premotion is like the overarching, right? And part and parcel to premotion is that which is a moral premotion and that which is concurrence, you know? So it's like these distinctions are only in reason, not in the subject, because in the subject you just have God's will, you know, and then you have what happens in creation, right?
Yo,
As infallible.
Leonardo, there's
right?
no more Jeffy tabs.
You don't have like it's not that you have God's concurrence, which is it has its own reference, and then God's it's all like a virtual minor distinction, basically, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially like the distinction between mercy and justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mercy and justice is a virtual minor distinction, so there doesn't need to actually be real discrete effects like there is with intellect and will. Mercy and justice can just be founded in the will. So then similarly, when we talk about the effect of God's will, which is our salvation, right? We don't need to create we don't have to over complexify. That's even a fucking word. We don't have to overly complicate the act of man. We can actually just say that man's act is simpler than what is being said, and that the distinction is actually only in reason posterior to the fact, not prior to the fact. But anyways, I don't know. It seems like I don't know what like it seems that Father Crane doesn't understand the topic as well as he wanted to understand it to then write about this. And I haven't heard a good objection to premotion because you can't use POE as the objection, you know? It's kind of like POE is not really going to be an objection because if you don't believe that God causes the act as act, then that itself is basically saying that there is no like the act. So the act can't be either. So let's say God doesn't cause the act as act, then there is no part of the act or its terminus that can be said to be of God, right? So you would have like a Pelagian problem here because then to act as act is not caused by God and upheld by God, right? Then per accident sin is not truly a punishment for fall or the proportionate punishment for salvation, like so not punishing for salvation, but after regeneration, you'd be saying that that's not the case, that man is truly disordered, right, in some sense, or there's no meaning behind that. So that's like one side of things. And then the other side of things is that, well, if man can choose, then man is choosing by natural capacity, and the power is not truly the nature is not elevated to make the choice, which is the whole point of free motion, by the way. So yeah, I don't know.
See, um, Father Sola's position is on divine motion. the Thomist system regarding the divine motion 14 years ago. Okay, our intention is to do respecting the Thomist ideas of physical premotion and simultaneous concurrence, of sufficient and efficacious grace, of predestination and of reprobation, of the divine antecedent and the consequent will, of the divine knowledge, of simple intelligence and vision, and of all the other ideas connected with these, something similar to what we did with the ideas of revelation and dogma, of connected and inclusive virtuality. Of theological principles and conclusions of the authority of God and the Church, of divine and ecclesiastical faith, that is to try and organize these ideas into a synthesis to our mind more harmonious and relatively new, but always within the fundamental principles of the doctrine of St. Thomas and his principal commentators. Okay, so he's going to try to stay Thomistic and be in line with his principal commentators. So that's John of St. Thomas, Caprilus, Cajetan, Banez, and another one I'm forgetting. Because this relative newness, okay, is on one hand what most animates us to write, and on the other hand, what instills in us the greatest fear. Without the hope of saying something new, it is not worth writing in a periodical of the stature of the La Ciencia Thomistica, and much more so concerning matters that have already been treated in an infinite number of times by the best among theologians. But to introduce the very least novelty in the traditional concepts of Thomism, above all regarding certain concepts over which Thomism has now been engaged in fighting for 3 centuries against Molinism, is an extremely risky business, and runs the risk, as is almost certain, of seeing raised against it in a tone of indignant protest the voice of certain excessively conservative Thomists, for whom there is hardly any sympathy for the very name of evolution, and for whom all novelty is regarded as being a corruption or transformation of Thomist doctrine. So yeah, you would fall into this group. I would fall into this group, but with clarification. Okay, when he cites this, who is he? In order to condemn a doctrine as anti-Thomistic, it is not enough to say that it adds something to the holy doctor St. Thomas, but because every explication or exposition worthy of such a name should add something to the explicated text, but something homogeneous and brought forth from the virtuality of the text or the context. Otherwise, one would be forced to reduce Thomism to a simple re-edition. Edison Ramirez. Father Ramirez affirms concerning adding something to St. Thomas can be extended with even more reason, as is clear to adding something to what is said by the commentators of St. Thomas. Would you agree with this?
Okay, so can you... I was listening, but read it was like the last 2 sentences that I didn't pay attention to.
Okay, I got you. So it's the last 2 sentences. Okay, there you go. That which, with his habitual open-mindedness, the wise Father Ramirez affirms concerning adding something to St. Thomas can be extended with even more reason, as is clear to adding something to what is said by the commentators of St. Thomas.
If adding something just means that we're saying that it's virtually contained, then yes, that's a Lagrange view of development. But what they're saying is that it's homogeneous, so it's remaining in species, which is the big question that is this in fact the same species of thought, which my
hold on.
apprehension.
Low-key, I'm gonna end the live here since we basically covered Catholic and Reformed tradition, and we came to the conclusion that it is not merely, it's not an internal one, it's just maybe at best we can say an external semantic dispute, but it is a true dispute nonetheless. So this conclusion has been arrived by the holy doctors of the Thomist school, therefore, etc. So God bless everyone for tuning in. If you're watching this later on, God bless you. Much love. And yeah, hit a sub if you enjoy these study streams or whatnot, and let me know what I can do better. Maybe, I don't know, upgrade the mic or do a solo study so you guys don't have background audio like, I don't know, my friends or someone talking. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, whatever.